My name is Helen. I'm 59 years old. Last month, I walked out of my son's house with one suitcase and a silence that rang louder than any goodbye. I didn't slam the door or raise my voice. I just walked like someone who had finally accepted a truth they'd been running from. The air outside felt sharp, not from the cold, but from the finality of what I'd left behind. He told me I was a burden. That word clung to me tighter than the coat I had wrapped around my shoulders. It didn't come out in anger. It came out like a fact, like he'd been holding it in for years and finally felt brave enough to say it. I used to think there was no greater honor than being needed by your child. That was before I learned how easily need can turn into resentment. I had gone there to rest, not to retire from love. No one asked if I was okay. No one offered a chair, a glass of water, or even a glance of warmth. I stood in my own son's kitchen like a stranger asking for too much. You're a burden. That sentence didn't just break my heart. It rewrote my entire understanding of motherhood. So I picked up what little I had brought: one suitcase, some clothes, a copy of a photo I used to keep framed, and I left not out of anger, but because I finally saw the room for what it was, a place I was no longer welcome in. I walked slowly, each step heavier than the last, not from the weight of my bag, but from everything else I'd carried for years. All the quiet sacrifices, all the missed holidays, all the times I convinced myself that love meant giving everything even when it cost me myself. Now I know better. That's why I'm telling you this story, not because I want sympathy, but because someone out there needs to hear that it's okay to stop proving your worth, especially to those who stopped seeing it a long time ago. The day I met Jacob, the hospital hallways smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. I was volunteering in pediatric recovery, mostly folding linens and reading to children whose parents couldn't stay the night. I wasn't looking to fall in love with anyone. My heart was still raw from losing my daughter 6 months earlier. She was only 8. And just like that, I had gone from mother to no one. My marriage was unraveling. Grief had widened every crack we tried to ignore. My husband spoke less and slept more. I stayed busy clinging to routines as if they could patch up the silence at home. But nothing filled the hollow space left behind. That afternoon, a nurse whispered there was a new intake. Abandoned. Severe heart defect. The details didn't matter as much as the way she looked at me, like she knew I wouldn't walk past that door. He was so small, swaddled tight in a blue and white blanket, his chest rising unevenly with each breath. Monitors beeped around him, and there was tape on his wrists from the IV. But his eyes found mine, and for a second, it felt like the entire world quieted. He didn't cry. He didn't fuss. He just stared like he was waiting for someone to finally arrive. I don't know why I reached out to touch his hand, but the moment I did, his fingers curled around mine, and I felt something shift inside me. I didn't think about paperwork or long-term plans. I didn't think about what my husband would say. I just knew I couldn't leave him. Not him, not like that. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed holding a photo of my daughter and listening to the house creak with winter wind. My husband had already gone to sleep, turned to the wall like he always did. And I thought about that boy, his paper-thin skin, the way he looked at me like I mattered. The next day, I asked if anyone had claimed him. They said no. No one had come. And I think in that moment, I decided I would. I didn't know it yet, but I had already begun choosing him. With my eyes, with my hands, with a heart that still believed in second chances. Raising Jacob was never easy, but I never once considered walking away. I worked nights at a nursing home, weekends, cleaning houses, and picked up odd shifts wherever I could. Sometimes I'd nap in the break room between jobs with a granola bar in my pocket and blisters on my heels. There were Christmas mornings where I wasn't there to open presents, only the tag I'd scribbled in a rush, taped to a box from the dollar store. Birthdays I missed were made up with voicemail songs and cupcakes left on the table. I told myself he understood that one day he'd see how hard I worked just to keep the lights on and his medicine paid. When Jacob turned 7, he needed another heart procedure. The hospital bills nearly broke me. I moved in with a wealthy widow named Mrs. Coleman, working as her live-in nurse and housekeeper. I gave up my own space so I could send more money home. My world became her routines, her medications, her needs. At night after she went to bed, I'd sit in the kitchen with her dog curled under the table and sew old linens into gift bags to sell at local markets. It wasn't much, but every dollar counted. I missed the school plays, the field trips, the little things that felt big once they were gone. Sometimes I called just to hear his voice. Jacob would be half distracted with a game or homework, but I hung on to every word. I'd say I was proud of him, even if he didn't say it back. I'd end each call with love, hoping that was enough to bridge the distance. When he graduated college, I stood in the crowd wearing an old suit I'd tailored myself. He didn't see me right away. He was surrounded by his girlfriend's family, all polished and present. I waited until the ceremony ended, then slipped a card into his jacket pocket. It had a check inside, everything I had saved that year. I thought if I kept giving, he'd never have to struggle the way I did. I thought love was supposed to be quiet, that sacrifice meant something without needing to be named. And so I kept giving, believing that someday, love would come back around. I arrived at Jacob's house just after sunset, suitcase in one hand, the other holding a box of cinnamon rolls I'd picked up from a bakery he used to love as a kid. The porch light was on, casting a warm glow, and for a moment I let myself believe this would be a new beginning. I had spent the ride rehearsing how to tell him I was finally done working, ready to rest, ready to just be mom again. I rang the bell twice. The door opened slowly, and there he was, older, tired looking, but still my boy. He didn't smile, just glanced at my suitcase, then looked behind me like he was expecting someone else. I stepped inside, set the rolls down on the counter, and told him I had retired. I said it softly, almost like a confession. He didn't ask why. He didn't ask if I was okay. His voice was sharper than I'd heard in years. He asked what I planned to do now. His tone was dry, his arms crossed. Then he said it. You quit, just like that. What now, you expect to sit around and freeload? I laughed softly, thinking he was joking. But his face didn't change. My breath caught somewhere between my chest and my throat. I tried to explain that I was tired, that I missed him, that I wanted to help with the new baby they were planning. He didn't hear any of that. He said we're already stretched thin. Diana's appointments, the mortgage, the baby fund. He said quitting now was irresponsible, that they were counting on my income. I reminded him I had used my savings to pay off part of their mortgage. He waved it off like that was ancient history. Diana came into the room halfway through. She didn't greet me. She asked if I had made arrangements for where I'd be staying. I blinked at her. I thought I had. I thought this was it. They stood there, both of them, asking questions about finances and benefits, like I was an unpaid employee who had resigned without notice. The warmth I'd imagined was nowhere to be found. I looked around at the framed photos, some I had taken, most I hadn't seen before, and felt like I was walking through someone else's life. I said I could help with the baby. I could cook, clean, support her during recovery. Diana raised an eyebrow. She said they would hire professionals. That postpartum care required trained people. Then she looked at Jacob and said I didn't have the energy for a newborn. I said nothing. I stood there in that kitchen where I had once taught Jacob to stir pancake batter and realized something I should have seen years ago. I wasn't coming home. I was reporting for duty, and I had already failed to meet expectations. Jacob didn't hug me. He didn't thank me. He just asked if I still had my uniform and whether I had considered working part-time again. I smiled, or something close to it, and said I'd think about it. But in that moment, something inside me cracked. Not loudly, just a soft tear through years of belief. The belief that if I gave enough someday, I'd be welcomed home. Later that evening, I brought up the baby again. I said I could help when the time came, be there during recovery, maybe stay up with the newborn so they could rest. I kept my voice steady, trying to sound useful, not desperate. Diana barely looked up from her phone. She said they had already decided to hire professionals. Postpartum care, she added, was best handled by people who were trained. Then she glanced at her mother, who nodded in agreement like it had all been settled weeks ago. I said I understood that, of course. I didn't want to interfere. I tried to smile, but my cheeks felt stiff. Then her mother looked straight at me and said I could still contribute by covering the costs. A night nurse, a nanny, those things added up. She said it so casually, like I was a fund, not a person, like my love was only useful if it could be converted into invoices. I nodded, though I felt something hollow take root in my chest. Jacob added that they'd really appreciate it, that with the baby coming, they needed more support than ever. I was still standing, but inside I was folding in on myself. I remembered when Jacob was a baby, when I worked double shifts to keep him fed, when I slept on a pull-out cot and cried into a dish towel so he wouldn't hear me. And now here I was, still being asked to give, but never to stay, never to be seen. Diana mentioned a postpartum doula they were considering. She had credentials, years of experience, glowing reviews. Then she looked at me and said something about safety and routines and how things were different now. Her voice was polite, but every word told me I didn't belong. I swallowed hard and said I'd look at my budget, that maybe I could help a little. I don't know why I said that. Maybe I wanted to keep pretending I mattered. But I knew. I knew in that moment that I wasn't family. I was an account, a line item, a liability with a smile. I packed slowly, folding each shirt with more care than I'd given myself in years. The suitcase wasn't large, just enough to hold what little I had brought. I didn't rush, not because I had time, but because I wanted the stillness to mean something. There was no final blowout, no slammed doors or shouted regrets, just silence, the kind that settles into a house when something important has quietly died. I moved through the guest room, collecting my toiletries, the extra blanket I'd brought from the nursing home, a paperback I hadn't touched. Everything fit easily. There wasn't much to take, because I had never really unpacked. In the hallway, I paused by the living room. The family photo sat above the fireplace, taken 5 years ago at a summer picnic. Jacob had insisted I stand to the side so everyone could fit. I looked at it now and realized I wasn't in the center. I never had been. I didn't take it. I didn't need the reminder. Some memories are lighter left behind. As I reached the door, Carol appeared in the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel like she had been waiting for this moment. She didn't look surprised. She asked where I was going, what my plan was, whether I had lined up another position yet. I told her no. I said I wasn't looking for more work, that at 59, after 30 years of labor, I had earned my rest. She blinked like the idea confused her. Then she said, maybe I should look into senior housing programs, ones where residents could assist in exchange for room and board. She made it sound reasonable, even helpful. I told her I wasn't interested. Not in kitchens I didn't own. Not in beds that required cleaning someone else's floors first. I had done that. For too long. Jacob stepped in halfway through. He asked if I was being dramatic. He said I still had years left to work, that retirement was a luxury people like us couldn't afford. He said he'd found a wealthy family looking for a live-in caregiver. Good pay, familiar setup. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just said no, not again, not for anyone. Carol's face tightened. She said I was being selfish, that families pulled together during hard times, that it was only fair I helped them through this new chapter. I told her I had already helped, that my chapter was over. I reached for the handle. My fingers felt calm, even steady. Behind me, the house stayed quiet. No one said my name. No one asked me to stay. As I stepped outside, the air hit different. Not cold, just honest. I walked down the driveway with a suitcase that weighed less than the years I had left behind. I didn't look back. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally did. A week after I left Jacob's house, a letter arrived from the law office that had handled Mrs. Coleman's estate. I almost didn't open it right away. I thought it was another form, maybe a final invoice or a tax document that needed signing. But when I finally sat down and read it, I had to read it twice. Then again. My eyes blurred. I couldn't quite make sense of what it said. Mrs. Coleman had left me everything, her home, her investments, her savings, $8 million, all transferred in my name. I sat very still, the letter resting on my lap, my hands open, palms up, like I was waiting for the truth to land gently. There was no one there to see my face, no cameras, no celebration, just me in a quiet room finally being told I mattered. I cried, not loud or messy, just a slow kind of crying that felt like something old breaking loose. It wasn't about the money. It was about being chosen, not for what I could do, but for who I had been to her. She had watched me care, not just for her medications or meals, but for her well-being. She saw the nights I stayed later than needed, the times I sat by her side just so she wouldn't feel alone. And she remembered. She remembered all of it. I didn't tell anyone, not Jacob, not his wife, not Carol. I kept it to myself like a warm secret I wasn't ready to share. For once, something good had found me, and I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I wasn't rich in the way the world usually defines it, but for the first time I felt full. Not because I had money, but because someone had looked at me and said, "You gave." And that was enough. The real estate showroom was bright and polished with marble floors that gleamed and windows tall enough to touch the sky. I had never stepped into a place like that as a buyer, only ever as someone who wiped down counters or served coffee at open houses. A young woman greeted me with a warm smile and offered to walk me through the listings. I nodded, grateful for her kindness. We had barely made it 10 steps when I heard a familiar voice, sharp and high. It was Emily, Carol's niece. She worked at the firm and recognized me immediately. Her heels clicked across the floor like accusations. She looked me up and down and asked what I was doing there. I told her I was there to view a home. She laughed and said they didn't do walkthroughs for people just looking for inspiration. Then she turned to the front desk and asked why security had let me in. People started to look over, some with curiosity, others with pity. I could feel the weight of a dozen eyes trying to place me, judge me, file me into a category that didn't belong. I said nothing at first, just reached into my purse and handed the folder I'd brought. Emily flipped through the pages with a smirk until she saw the numbers. 5 million liquid, no debt, verified documentation. She froze, still tried to argue, claiming it had to be a mistake. I didn't raise my voice. I simply opened my banking app and held out the screen. 8 million clear as day. There was a beat of silence. Then someone behind me whispered something about how she had money, real money. The showroom manager stepped in, apologizing for the confusion. He said he would personally assign their top agent to help me. I declined politely. I pointed to the young woman who had greeted me. She was respectful from the start. She treated me like I mattered before she knew anything about my account. I wanted her. Emily stood off to the side, pale and quiet. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just turned to the scale model and pointed to a quiet villa with a garden and wide windows. That one, I said. Let's start there. About 2 weeks after I moved into my new place, a neighbor stopped me while I was watering my flowers. She looked concerned, said she had seen something online I might want to be aware of. I didn't know what to expect, but I thanked her and went inside. I opened my laptop, typed Jacob's name, and found it almost instantly. A live stream, thousands of viewers, a channel titled, How My Mother Abandoned Me. He was crying. His voice cracked like a child. He talked about how I left just as they needed me most, how I refused to help with the baby, how money had changed me. He said he felt heartbroken, betrayed. The comments poured in. Poor guy. Mother should love unconditionally. You deserve better. Donations followed. So did brand deals. I watched him thank people for their support, show off baby gear they'd sent, even announce merchandise with slogans like, love shouldn't hurt. It didn't feel real, but it was happening. And the worst part was how convincing he was. I clicked off the stream and sat with my hand still on the keyboard. For the first time in a long while, I felt something colder than anger. I felt used. Not just in private, but now, publicly. At first I thought about letting it pass, ignoring it, protecting my peace. But then I saw another clip, one where he said he didn't want money, just my love. And that was the moment I broke. Because he never once asked for love. Not in that kitchen, not when I stood with my suitcase. Not once did he say stay. All he ever wanted was more of what I had already given. So I made a decision. I registered a channel of my own. I called it, So This Is the Mother Who Left. I uploaded a single post first, a donation, a few thousand, sent directly to his live. The message said, Tonight I'm giving away $100,000. But first, come hear the truth. The numbers spiked within the hour. Viewers poured in, some from his stream, some curious, some angry, and then I spoke. I started with a simple introduction. My name, my story. I didn't cry, I didn't plead, I just told the truth. I held up the adoption certificate, explained how Jacob was left in a hospital bassinet with no name, how I had just buried my own child and walked out of that room with a boy who didn't belong to anyone, until I made him mine. Then I showed records, medical bills, tuition receipts, wire transfers, mortgage documents, every year, every sacrifice, all of it. I played a voice message. His voice casually asking if I could return to being a live-in so they wouldn't have to budget for daycare. The chat lit up. Some people didn't believe it. At first. Then I showed photos of birthdays he never remembered. Graduation cards I mailed from the city where I worked 2 jobs to pay for his future. His voice, once the center of sympathy, was now the echo of greed. I ended with a message. I said I didn't walk away because I lacked love. I walked away because loving him had almost broken me. I said silence isn't kindness. It's just the place you sit when no one listens. The shift was immediate. Comments turned. Supporters left his stream. Sponsors pulled their deals. Viewers apologized to me. Others asked how they had fallen for his version so quickly. His account was reported, then suspended. A platform statement followed about violating community standards. He lost the income, the influence, the pity. But I didn't stop there. I filed a defamation suit. With help from a lawyer a friend referred. I showed the judge the messages, the clips, the impact, and I won. He was ordered to issue a public apology, pay court fees, stop mentioning me anywhere online. The ruling said it plainly. What he did wasn't just dishonest, it was emotional exploitation. And just like that, I was free, legally, financially, emotionally. No more explaining, no more shrinking, no more being reduced to the woman who gave everything. That night, I closed my laptop and walked to my porch. The lake was still, my hands weren't shaking, and for the first time, I breathed without feeling like someone was pulling from me. He had his moment, he told his version, but the truth held. The truth always does. The morning after my live stream went viral, I made an appointment with a lawyer. She was direct but kind, and she listened. I handed her a folder with everything I had already shown online. She reviewed the clips, the messages, the defamation. She said we had a case, not just legally, but morally. We filed the paperwork within a week. Jacob didn't respond right away, but eventually he tried to settle privately. I declined. Not because I wanted a fight, but because I needed the truth on record. I needed it written somewhere official that what he did was wrong. The hearing was brief. The evidence was too clear. His channel, the merchandise, the false claims all presented in sequence. He lost. The court ordered him to issue a public apology. They also required him to pay for emotional damages and all legal fees. His followers vanished. Sponsors dropped him. The platform suspended his account indefinitely. There were no more donation buttons. No more sympathy threads. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile when the ruling came down. I just nodded and thanked the judge. Outside the courthouse, the sun was warm. I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady. And that was more than enough. I went home and packed away the last of the legal papers. I placed the apology in a drawer I rarely open. Then I made tea and watched the lake from my porch. He had chosen his path. I had chosen mine, and now we were both living with those choices. The justice wasn't in the punishment. It was in the peace that followed. The chapter had ended. I didn't need to tell the story again. After the court proceedings ended, I sold the second home and moved to a quiet lakeside town a few hours outside the city. It wasn't flashy, but the mornings were calm and the evenings felt like they belonged only to me. I didn't tell many people where I went. I didn't need to. For the first time, I wasn't running away from anything. I was simply choosing something better. My house is small with big windows that let the light in just right. There's a garden out back where I grow herbs and tomatoes. Some mornings I sit by the lake with coffee and just watch the water move. Inside there's a piano in the sunroom. I play sometimes slowly without trying to impress anyone, just letting the notes stretch into the space around me. No one calls asking for money. No one groans when I say I'm tired. The silence here is gentle. It doesn't punish me. It holds me. Sometimes I paint not because I'm good at it, but because I like seeing color appear from nothing. I hang my favorite ones on the wall, not to show off, just to remind myself that creation can come from quiet. The neighbors are kind. We wave, exchange soup recipes, help each other carry groceries. No one asks what I used to do. No one treats me like I owe them a version of myself I no longer want to live in. This life is slow, but it's mine. I belong to myself now. And that after everything is more than I ever thought I'd have. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that love alone doesn't protect you. You can pour your time, your energy, even your soul into someone and still end up discarded the moment you stop giving. That doesn't mean your love wasn't real. It just means it wasn't respected. I used to think being a good mother meant never saying no. That sacrifice was just part of the job. But I've come to understand that kindness without boundaries is not love. It's surrender. You don't owe anyone your destruction in the name of loyalty. Not your children, not your partner, not your family. Love should never be a life sentence. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to walk away from people who only see your value when it benefits them. That choice isn't cruel. It's courageous. I know how hard it is to choose yourself, especially when the world calls it selfish. But I promise you there is peace waiting on the other side of that decision. Not the kind of peace that looks perfect on the outside, the quiet kind, the kind where your breath feels like your own again. So, if you're listening to this and you've ever been made to feel like a burden, please hear me. You are not. You're not weak. You're not selfish. You're not less than for wanting to be treated with care. You are worthy of love that doesn't drain you, of respect that doesn't have conditions, of being seen as a person, not a source. And if you've had to walk away from someone you love, I hope you know you're not alone. Have you ever been there? Have you ever had to choose yourself when it broke your heart? If so, I hope today you feel a little less alone and a little more whole.